Welcome to the Big Fat Real Estate Checks podcast with Marco Kozlowski, where we help investors like you get the knowledge and skills you need to replace your JOB with passive cash flow for life.
Hey, Marco here. I really wanted to share with you our earlier podcasts that we created. Now, our mics were not the best, but the content was really strong, and I know you will learn a lot. We had an absolute blast recording this, and I know you're absolutely going to love it as much as we loved recording it. This extremely content-rich information will not only give you the edge in your real estate investing business, but in everyday life. Enjoy. Welcome to another episode where we're going to be discussing contracts and the kind of fun clauses and fun additions that we've implemented into our agreement over the last 20 years that allows us to protect ourselves, level the playing field to make sure that we're in more of a control position, not necessarily have to deal with shady sellers. What I mean by that is it can be common practice in commercial real estate specifically, where we go under contract, we have a certain amount of days for due diligence, and then we have a certain amount of days to close. And in some instances, we get a property under contract, at least in the past. We wait for due diligence documents that never arrive. The seller does not give it to us. There is no stipulation in the agreement that if the seller doesn't give it to us, that there's any consequence whatsoever. Then what generally happens is they continue to list the property while this due diligence period is on. No due diligence items are given. The buyer gets frustrated, says, you know what, guys, screw you, I'm out. And they exit the contract because they haven't gotten due diligence documents. And meanwhile, they found another buyer for a higher amount. And they keep doing that until they get to the right buyer. And just going through next buyer after buyer after buyer, not giving due diligence, not giving due diligence documents, not giving due diligence documents to the point where they're basically playing every buyer until they get the price that they want. The agreements that we use level the playing field where if we have it under contract, there is a consequence if they don't do certain things. So we could, in effect, be in a perpetual contract situation and really be protected. And we hold ourselves accountable to what we're supposed to do. And if we don't do what we say, there's a consequence. But if if the seller doesn't do what they say, they also have a consequence. Now, I actually rely on these two marvelous humans to help me with my agreements. My strength is not paperwork, theirs is. And so I'm going to have them go over the processes, what needs to be done, and how it needs to be done. And so, guys, boys, take it away.
I think the first thing to discuss is earnest money deposit. So once you tie up a property, it's usually asked of you to put in a deposit, and obviously it's in the seller's best interest that deposit be as large as possible, and it's in your best interest for that deposit to be as small as possible. And typically that earnest money deposit is non-refundable, and that's something that if what Marco just mentioned happens over and over again, can you imagine getting into a contract, putting down $10,000 in earnest money deposit and never getting due diligence documents? So your due diligence period ends and you have a decision to make. Do I get out of the contract, lose my 10 grand, or do I buy this without even knowing what the hell I'm actually buying? So that's something that we don't feel is fair. And so to level the playing field, we've put in some measures in our agreements. The first thing is that the EMD, or the earnest money deposit, is going to always be refundable until we've completed our due diligence period and we're satisfied of it. So if you have the EMD done or sent in escrow and you don't receive due diligence documents, so you decide to exit the agreement because you don't want to buy it, you haven't been able to check anything, then up until that time, your earnest money deposit is refundable, so you don't lose anything. And we feel that levels the playing field a lot.
Actually, on that note, I know that's a huge advantage, or a huge laying out the playing field with the EMD, because most, even state contracts that I've seen in the past, they have the non-refundable component. They have an exit clause, but they're so ridiculous. One of them will be if title is not clear and marketable.
Yep.
So you're still putting up your 10K, and it's
Or 20,
non-refundable.
and sometimes it's 100.
And they give you two scenarios, or maybe three, depending. So one of them would be, okay, if it's not clear and marketable title, yes, you can ask for your money back if the seller does not remedy that problem. So that's one. And then number two, on some of these state contracts, what they have is if the appraisals, and only some of them have this, if the appraisal does not come within the purchase price, then the seller and the buyer can negotiate. You have to give them written notice saying, hey, our appraisal came in below this amount. I want to renegotiate the price, but they only have like 5 days to give written notice of that. So that means you would have to go out, make sure you get an appraisal. If you're not content with it, then you have to give written notice to the seller saying why. And if they don't do anything about it, you negotiate that, you can get out. So they do offer that, but again, you still have to jump through hoops. And the other one is, if you do buy on contingent with financing, if you say no, I can't get financing, they can say, you know what, we need to see 3 applications that went in and why you didn't get financing. So if those three triggers do not happen, you lost your 10K or your 15K or your 50,000, whatever. The way that Marco, again, this is a 20-year work in progress document. 20 years.
Still a work in progress.
It's still a work in progress. It's always evolving because we always find things. But the language that we have in there specifically for the EMD is clever, and we have different variations of it.
And I think
we have four variations of when the EMDs do. We can give a little bit now, a little bit later. We can give all of it later after certain triggers, and our triggers will be once the property checks out financially, conditionally, and physically, or spiritually, whatever. But But we have our again. There's 4 We're not going to go in each 4 of the variables, but just know that our EMD, even if it's always going to be non-refundable, but even if it is, it's always going to be refundable. But even if it is non-refundable, we put that on the back end.
Yeah, when you're committed or when you know you're going to buy the property, then we don't care if it's non-refundable because it's going to be deducted from the purchase price.
We're going to buy it anyway. Now, EMD, if we haven't explained, it's earnest money deposit. It's the deposit necessary in order to secure the property.
Right.
And it can be paid now, a little bit now, a little bit later, or later.
Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say that another important aspect of the earnest money deposit is even if it is refundable, for the most part, if it's not stipulated otherwise, you're going to need the seller to sign off on the refund. So they can actually hold your deposit hostage even though you are entitled to receiving it. And that's something that's going to be a pain in the ass for you because if the only way to get that back if the seller's playing hardball is to actually go through a litigation, which is probably going to cost you more than the amount that you have in escrow. So that's sort of your EMD being held hostage. So to remedy that, we have language in our paperwork that stipulates that there is no need for the seller to sign off for us to be refunded if we ask for it back within, the refundable period. So that's something you should always keep in mind when you're drafting your agreements.
Yeah. And you get a lot of headbutts on that. I know some title companies, when they say, well, no, we need the other party to sign off. And it's like, no, clearly read our, paragraph 3.
Yeah.
And I highlight it for them and they read it and they go, oh shit, because it's only one party needs to consent to get it returned back to us within that time period. We're not going to be assholes and say on the last day we want our money back. It's within a specific time period.
There's checks and balances that have to be followed. But please understand, if a title company sends you their own document to sign, it'll supersede your contract. So don't be very careful and very wary of title companies or escrow companies, because you have escrow, you have title, and you have lawyer states. So you have different states that do it different ways. And then in Louisiana, it's done even differently because it's Napoleonic law. It's not the same as the rest of the U.S. It's like in Quebec actually. Same thing with notaries and lawyers that do them. Yeah, the lawyers that do it. So be very careful of what you sign from a title company, because if you have or use our contracts and the title company sends you something that'll supersede that, you could be shooting yourself in the foot, where you're obligated to follow title company rules. And if they're telling you that it has to be done their way or no way, then you have to change title companies. I do not allow a mutual release, anything other than a mutual release by our contract. I don't want to have $10,000, $1,000, $500, $20,000, $100,000 into the title company. Now, this is extremely important as well, is do not send money to a seller directly or an agent.
Yes.
All right. That is a recipe to kiss that money goodbye. Sadly, I had one of my followers that went on Craigslist, saw apparently a really good deal. Seller said, I need your earnest money deposit today or I'm selling it to somebody else. They wired him $35,000 to as an earnest money deposit to secure the property, and it was a scam. Obviously, they never saw that money again, or the property because it didn't exist. So never send money to anyone other than I recommend an ALTA title company, because even a title company, we have another follower. His name is Raj. I've also interviewed him. He has close to 400 doors now. He's extremely, he's gone, and I met him at the same time as I met Frank and you guys.
Super successful.
Very successful guy out of Toronto. He sent money to a title company he didn't follow my advice. He's a guy's smart guy. Didn't follow my advice, and the title company was owned by a lawyer that was not ALTA approved. And the guy took the money that was in escrow and bought kilos of cocaine and actually went to prison. And he lost his money. There was no insurance for the money that was in escrow. So he lost his money.
I think I saw that episode on American Greed. CNBC, Wednesday nights.
Could you imagine? Could you imagine, like, you send money to an escrow company or that you think is reputable, and they literally take your money and they buy kilos of cocaine with it, and the guy ends up going to prison.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. So that's why I recommend using ALTA. Now, here's the thing, is I have the benefit of looking over hundreds of followers that are doing dozens of deals at a time. So I'm seeing thousands of transactions that are going on in a year, and all the things that can go wrong in those thousands of transactions. And we're dealing with seller to seller, seller with agents, agents to us. There's a lot of different scenarios that are being played out. So I have the benefit of seeing a lot of shit every year for the last, I've been mentoring for over a decade. Actually, 2005 is when I started. 15 years I've been helping folks buy property. So I've seen a lot of shit. So understand that I'm going to see the worst and the best in people. So I'm in a very fortunate position that I can see and recognize the things that can go wrong and fix them before they actually happen. And that's what we've put into this agreement. And it's just getting better and better and better. So as far as escrow, title, or lawyers go, make sure that you have one that's been around for a while. And with EMD, make sure you protect it. And if you do, now the EMD, another question is going to be, well, Marco, I thought, you're buying properties with, no money out of your pocket. I am buying properties with no money out of my pocket. That EMD will be refunded to me at closing if you buy your property right. In fact, I'll pull money out. I've pulled $3, $4, $5, $10, $50, $100,000 out of closing if you structure the deal correctly. Okay, so understand that it's the earnest money deposit at times has to be put in, but that's money that you can get back if you've done the right negotiation with the seller.
There's got to be a monetary consideration, of course. So you're not buying the property; you're basically just
tying it up.
You're just tying it up with the agreement, with that monetary consideration. You need to put it down. So at that point, you're not buying it; you can get it back. But like Marco said, you get it back when you close.
Yes.
So just to go back,
or when you back out.
Or when you
wholesale
it,
yes. Or if you choose to wholesale it, or if you choose to, so either back out, wholesale, which is sell the contract.
Yeah.
If it doesn't check out or it doesn't meet our criteria, we have another episode on that where we've discussed this. This agreement allows us to have control and options and choices.
And again, just to reiterate that we do this to level the playing field out. So there's consequences to us. If we don't back out of a property by the time due diligence ends, we lose that deposit. It's lost, and it's sadly happened to some people who don't keep track of the days. But if you say you got 30 days to do something and you don't do it, then you're on the hook for the consequence. So all we're doing here is making sure that we have the appropriate time to actually analyze what the seller's telling us through their due diligence documents, and then we can have a better idea of if that's true and we want to go forward with the purchase, or if it's a bunch of bull and that we want to get out. And then if we do want to get out, we don't think it's fair that they keep our money because we've spent the time and resources to do the work, not them. All they've done is put the property off market. In theory, that's what they're supposed to do for the period of time. But if they're bullshitting, then why do they deserve money?
In the end,
Right.
is a game, and you're just setting the rules. And if you do this, you get this. If you do that, you get this. If you don't get that, this happens. So it's just basically what you just said.
And we're creating our own rules because we have the gold.
Yeah.
So, or we're using somebody else's gold. So understand that in another episode, we actually have, I think the title of the episode is "Who Has the Gold Makes the Rules."
That's right.
And it's our money and our transaction, our contract, and I want to say agreement more than contract.
Yeah.
I don't like the word contract in general. I like to okay paperwork. That's kind of the softest, most docile way of putting something in a way where it doesn't seem very aggressive, and it's very,
Passive.
It's very passive. Yeah.
It's
So
gentle.
it is gentle. That's
It's like,
a
It's
better
like fabric
Like
softener.
Frank's
Yes.
touch.
It's like fabric softener.
I
It's
wouldn't
the
know
Midas
why
touch.
you would know that, but
it's-
okay.
Okay, we're gonna edit that one out, folks. But let's move on to the next one. So we got escrow.
We did Earnest
We got
money
EMD.
deposit.
Yep, we got
So
EMD.
what else is a big thing is inspection period, right? The due diligence. That's probably one of the biggest.
It is.
Yeah.
And you can get burned. Again, going back to the state contracts or the seller contracts that brokers give you, that inspection period typically start as soon as you put your name on the dotted line. The time's ticking, and that's a problem because of our past experiences
Yes.
where you got to check out the property. And I think we've mentioned this several times. We trust but verify. So we trust you, seller, but now it's time to verify what you said in
Back it
terms
up.
of the conditions, the finances, and everything. So that inspection period is crucial. That it doesn't start right away unless you have an enormous big time that you have.
But
all
even
that time.
though, because even if you have 2 years and they never send you anything, that's still you still have nothing
You're
to
in
work
the
with.
same place. So why would it be fair for the 2 years to even start it until they give us what we need? Does not just make sense?
I
Well,
agree.
yes, yeah,
But it's
At least
never
it
written
does
that
to
way.
us.
It does. It's just common sense. I'll do what I'm supposed to do when you give me. You have to do something in order for me to start something.
Yeah.
And it's not just the physical building that we're taking a look at. This is not like I'm talking also residential and commercial. In commercial, we're buying income, and in residential, at least I'm buying income. I don't want to buy. I'm not looking to buy a property. I'm looking to buy the income in the property. And if you're stating that there's income, I want to see that there's income. Now, in smaller assets, and like in single families, duplex, triplexes, that's not as important as a 20 unit, a 30 unit, a 50 unit, 100 unit building. I want to know if I'm buying that income, if I'm going to keep the existing tenants there, or if I'm going to demolish it, or kick everyone out and then build it up from the ground. Then I wouldn't care as much about the income because I'm looking at the structure at that point. I'm doing a value add, or I'm repositioning the property. So it's different. But if I'm in the business to just take the existing tenants and income, then I need to make sure that I have everything in my possession from the seller in order for me to make that sound decision.
Yep.
So just to conclude on this part, your inspection period should always, or your due diligence period should always, there has to be a timeline for you to either receive the documents. So they have to give you the documents within X amount of time, or else,
This
consequence that happens.
Yes.
Or you can only say that the due diligence period will only begin once you received your due diligence documents. Either way, the clock starts ticking when you have the information.
And if they don't, for example, you could say for every day that they're late, it's a 3-day penalty.
Yeah,
and they could say, well, why are you doing it that way? Why isn't it 1-to-1? Well, the answer is, well, we have a team of people that actually do check out the due diligence, and we don't know. We're going to hold them on standby for X amount of time, and then after that, we're going to have to repurpose them. So if you're 4 days late, I don't know when I'm going to be able to take that team and put them back in. So I'm going to need 3 days for every day that you're late past, let's say, 10 days. So you have 10 days to do it. If you can't do it, and I could say how many days you think it's going to take you.
Yep.
10 days. All right, let's put 10 days. Let's give you 11 days. How about that?
Yeah, sometimes we give them just
Yeah,
more.
how about 12?
We'll add 3 more days to it.
Let's add 3 more days. So that way it's fair. We're not trying to be an asshole. We're not trying to screw anyone over. It's just, you tell me how long it's going to take you to get these documents. And they have this list. It's not like a surprise, like, surprise, we need, the birth certificate of your great-great-great-great-grandmother on your dad's side. I'm like, what? How would I ever get that?
In color.
Yeah. And a picture with them smiling, which is impossible because they never smiled in those old pictures. It's like, why am I taking this picture?
They're so serious.
It's
so serious.
Yes.
Stats
It's like something's happening in the background. So it's,
but on that note, like even with the EMD, we have different variations on the inspections as well. So we can selectively say, okay, here's all our DD items, but we only need items 2, 3, 7, and 8 within that 10 days or 15 days to make it fair. Yeah. Again, and the whole point of this is to minimize your risk, because you have your escrow in there, and you don't want it to be that held up, because it could be used for another opportunity.
Right.
And
the
also
money's generating nothing in there.
Well, it's not, and the reason you're doing is the first step is you're minimizing your expenses during your inspection.
Right.
So right now it's your time you're devoting. So you say, give me these items so I can just check out and verify that the numbers check out, because ultimately you're buying cash flow.
Yeah.
Right. So if the cash flow is not there, there's no use in engaging a property inspector. There's no use engaging managers to go out there and wasting their time and resources, because it's other people's time. You got to respect that. And there's no use you engaging a title company and paying to open up escrow, because it costs to open up an escrow account, right? So to do all that, before you even do all that, well, the escrow is different depending which one we use. If escrow is due at the end of inspection, then we're saving everyone's money, right? So you can ask for specific items by a certain time period, or even after you get all that, that's when your inspection period starts. That's when you're going to engage your team that's on standby, ready to, at the gates to go out.
ready to go.
So that's due diligence. Are there goodies? You want to go over the
rents? There's some caveats that you put in there that actually benefit you, the buyer. One of them that we put in there is, depending on the property, you can actually get credits at closing. And some of the language we have in the agreement and the paperwork is that we state that we want to keep the rents for that particular month of closing. So if your closing is, what's today, the 23rd, if your closing is towards the end of the month, you can get credited the month for the whole month for those rents. So if the rents are $10,000,
we'll get the whole $10,000 worth of rents for that month. So whether we close on the 1st, the 3rd, or the 30th, we're going to get the entire month's rents. Now, again, the seller signs off on this. This is not something that we just squeeze in and that's hidden between,
and there's pushback sometimes, and this is something.
And that's okay.
That's okay. If they say no, then this
fine. We'll prorate it on the day that we close. But we're going to ask for things expecting to say no. We're going to ask them to pay all the closing costs.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
We're going to ask them to pay, all closing costs for buyer and seller. So if we are charged points, title insurance, all that stuff, it's all going to be put on the seller side. And we're going to say, here are all the closing costs that we want the seller to pay. And it's listed. And if they don't, and 50% of the time they're going to say yes, and 50% of the time they're going to say there's no way we're going to do that. And that's okay. We're okay with either scenario. It's just, if we don't ask, we don't get. Every offer you never make will be refused. That's 100% of the time, right? Every shot you don't take, you're going to miss.
Yeah, Wayne Gretzky.
It's the same thing. So you gotta, you just gotta ask. You just gotta ask. So we're very bold in, the fortune favors the bold and the brave, and
bold but transparent. So that's the whole thing. We're bold, but we're transparent. And like I said, they can come back and give some pushback. So,
and we're okay with that.
In addition to the credits for that particular month, we also ask for, do tenants have deposits? And if they do, we want those too.
Well, of course, because the deposits technically don't belong to the seller. No, they belong to the tenants, and they're held in escrow. So those are supposed to be transferred anyway, but we make sure that that's done.
Yeah, that's not almost non-negotiable. I mean, if that's... I would question a seller's integrity if they wanted to keep the deposits, because that's not even their money. It's
Agreed.
Sometimes we have that the seller pays for the insurance premium for title, because if it's free and clear, this and that, we want them to pay that. And again, sometimes we get pushback on it, sometimes we don't. But occupancy is one thing we do have in there. We want a certain amount of. So if they're saying it's 80% or 90% occupancy, we expect that at the time of closing. We don't want to get to closing and then find out that where's everyone, and you hear everything's empty. So we can put that. Now there's a danger to that too, because if they fall behind that threshold, if we want it to be 80%, so just say on a 20 unit, and we say, okay, well, we know there's 15 and we want to hold you to the 15 at closing, but they dip down to 10, they may get some riffraffs to fill it up to the 15th.
Which I've had before, where the landlord is paying people or just getting people, literally people on the street just to go in there, and they're destroying the units. The seller doesn't care; they're selling it.
Yes.
Now, not every seller is going to be that way. So I'm not painting.
In fact, most won't.
Yes,
but
99.9% of sellers are very outstanding, honest, good people. But the 1% could screw you, and that's why we have the right agreements, just in case.
We have a DD item because of that scenario.
Yes,
We have a DD item that we ask for, not only the lease, because everyone can make up the lease. We can punch out leases right now and type them up and get them signed. But with an application, a background check, and any photo ID to make sure that it is a real person. Because people do lie about.
It could be an orangutan. We don't know.
It could be an orangutan. We talked about the orangutan. So we do have that language in.
As long as he's paying.
That's okay. I'd like to see that. But anyways, going back to that, yes, there's a pro and a con, but I think we cover that in our DD items that we want to see the lease, the application, some kind of ID and background check to make sure it's a real human and they are qualified to be in there and they're not being paid to stay there so it looks pretty on paper until they close, and then by the time you know it, the whole unit or the whole building is vacant.
At the end of the day, you can't prevent all scenarios. There's always, if someone wants to screw you, they will find a way to do it.
Yeah.
What we've done here is we've given you some tools to be able to minimize the damage to you, specifically financially, but also in terms of time and risk, should you want to get into a contract for a property. And I think we've covered, for the most part.
Again, these are the
major
top features.
ones.
There's a lot more. We're not going to go through the whole thing here, but there is definitely a lot more in here that we do put. And our DD item list will differ. So that doesn't even remain the same based on the asset class. And we talked about different asset classes.
And sometimes it's in the agreement directly, and sometimes it's sent to them after they sign.
After they sign, correctly. So and it's usually on a case by case
when
we send them the DD ahead of time, and some of them it's an exhibit. Part of the agreement, and sometimes we leave it out of the exhibit and we just give it to them after we type the property. So again, we don't want to get into the whole condition, but we have things in our condition of the property. What happens if it does deteriorate? What happens if there is a fire? What happens if the tenant does punch holes in the walls or whatever? We have language in there that basically the onus and the responsibility lies on the seller
to give us the property in the same condition that we inspected.
Yeah, so whether they fix it or they give us a credit. So anyways, we're not going to go through all of that. I think just knowing that the paperwork that we do have is an evolving one, and I think because of the experiences we have with some of your followers, and they come up and like, you know what, if we can learn from someone that got hurt in it, and we can incorporate it in this legally, this ethically as well, then we'll do so, and we continue to do with our paperwork. So there's not just one fit all agreement. It's evolving, and
and again, they're all ideas. I mean, we've built this. I mean, Marco's built most of this over his 20-year period. We've continued to build on it since. We've been working with Marco, but this is, if you had to put a cost on this contract. Like what would it be?
This is millions of dollars of lost revenue
because of it.
Because of it. Yeah. So the contract isn't for sale. If you email us and at Kozlowski.com and say, "Hey Marco, can I buy your contract?" The answer is no. But if you want to attend a class, I will give you the contract as part of the class, so you understand how to use it. So I will gladly gift you the contract for the class on how to use it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Because it's like giving you a gun, and without you understanding how to actually put it together. And we have a whole process actually to help people fill this contract out. And I have lawyers, real estate agents. I have even judges that have come to my class and got properties under contract and messed up the contract. I don't think one person has ever submitted a contract to us and has been good the first time.
No.
Has that happened yet?
And we try to make it easy and
not to me
fair one, but you're right. We color coordinate this thing.
Yeah.
But like I said, because it changed, we have different variations of it because of the different asset classes, different scenario. We do mix it up.
But even the deal itself, when it gets created, you know, whether there's mortgage there, owner financing, if it's just a straight out regular purchase, where's the down payment come from? There's so many moving parts all the time that it's almost impossible to get this right unless you know how it works.
Yeah. Well, the mechanic, we're not going to get into the mechanics that definitely on this, so that's for sure.
No,
but we just wanted to communicate that yes, we do have an evolving paperwork that does lay out the even out the playing field. Is it's not leaning towards the seller and the broker, but
it's leaning towards us even. It's just it's fair. It's a fair agreement.
It's a very transparent, fair, and everyone knows what to do. And if they don't do it, yes, there's consequences, and there's consequences for us too in here.
And it will not only save you money, it'll save you from making mistakes. It'll it'll protect you from shady sellers. It'll save you time, and it'll actually make you more money in every single circumstance.
Not only that, I think it's going to also present you as a really legitimate buyer to someone who's receiving this because they know that this isn't your first rodeo.
You have your own paperwork, and someone insists on using their paperwork. I have an easy solution. I'm saying, absolutely, you can use your paperwork if we're using your money to buy it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's and if you want to use my money, then we're going to use my paperwork.
Yeah.
I'm okay with using yours. When would you like to close using your paperwork?
Yeah, and you know what? Yeah, in all fairness, there is times that we do use not their paperwork. We use if there's certain clauses that is mutual for both. We say give it to us. We'll look at them. We'll add it in an addendum, but the paperwork stays as is. But we'll add some clauses that
they want to see
that you want to see on it, and obviously we got to vet it to see if it's mutually satisfactory to all parties, and we'll add it to an addendum. So we're not assholes all the time or using their money, but it's rare because again, everything's laid out here.
Now, again, we could send this to to a lawyer, which happens all the time, and it comes back like someone died on it. It's murdered. Like it's more red. It's more red than it is black and white.
Yeah.
And the answer to that is we're not buying it.
That's right.
We're not going to buy it. So if you are destroying our language to that point, there's no reason to. So I guess we're just not going to be your buyers. Or we can hop on a call. If you're a follower of mine, I'd actually hop on a call with the seller, and the seller says, well, my lawyer has done this. And I'm like, well, then your lawyer can buy it.
That's right.
If you want your lawyer your lawyer's there to protect you, and I understand. But if you can show me where I'm actually hurting you in this language, I'll change it. No problem. But I'm not changing it just so your lawyer has a make work program, because that's generally what happens is they're just going to change it so they look good.
And they bill you.
And they're going to bill you.
It's billable time. It's billable time.
So if you want you're basically, it's your money. If you want my money, you're going to use my agreement the way it is. And if there's something here that you think is shady or that it's going to hurt you in some way or that's putting you in a compromising position, I'd be happy to change it. I don't want to take advantage of anyone.
Yeah.
But your lawyer is just basically hurting you at this point just because they want to either look good or they're trying to protect you, but they're actually doing the reverse. A sword is double-edged.
That's it. It's putting accountability on the seller, and that's where the push-up is. Like, what if I don't do this? You're going to add 3 days to that? Like,
forget it.
Put in accountability.
Yeah.
And if they're not comfortable with that, then what do you think their real intentions are?
They're hiding something.
They're hiding something.
There's something wrong with
the red flags.
They're red flags.
Yeah.
So,
which we're glad to find out before we buy.
Yeah, exactly, and it tells a lot about the seller. Like we had a seller on a hotel where we had negotiated voraciously. We actually got to an agreement, and they were nitpicking on small little clauses for how long? That Holiday Inn was like
almost 4 months.
4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
4 or 5 months.
It took us 4 or 5 months to even not get to an agreement because the seller was literally just crazy.
$1,000 on $7 million.
And the broker who was retained by the seller even called it out, saying there's more that he doesn't know about this, about the partnership with the seller. There's something there that the seller didn't disclose even to his own broker who he hired, and that's why things went the way they did, and they dragged because you know what? They found that they were trying to find someone to take that bait, and we did, and we questioned it, and I think we came to
we gave him
solutions. We gave him Here's option A.
They had never
B,
met a
and
buyer
C.
like us ever, because we could, no matter what their objections were, we had solution. Even tax. We showed them how to save $1 million in tax.
Yes.
When they sold
Other
it.
capital gains.
And that's still, and they were still like not
Nitpicking over $2,500.
20. It was, and this is a $10 million deal.
Yeah.
You know, $10 million deal over $2,500.
$2,500.
It doesn't make any sense.
So we obviously didn't end up in agreement. We didn't buy it, but we
like-
gained an amazing broker that's not working for us.
and that just brought us another deal that
Off-market deal.
that is even better than the last one. So,
Right.
and they're, you know, and that without a shady seller. And so it's how we handle ourselves from the beginning that makes a big difference. And the guy is convinced that we can close, and he's never seen a bank account. He's never seen
Proof of funds.
He's never
We've
met
never
us.
given.
Never
He's never
seen
met
us.
us. He doesn't know what we look like.
Thank God if you showed him Frank.
Wow. Oh man.
Cut this out. It's with love. I know. I know it's with
It's
love.
always with love.
I know it's with love.
always
But
with
but
love.
We
that's
have a
the,
good time.
but listen, that's the whole point in something like that. We've seen it, and if you keep control of the conversation, and there's nothing in here that hurts
Nobody.
the seller. It's just making them accountable, and that's what they don't like if they're hiding something.
Yes. Well, if we're held accountable, we I think it's reciprocity at that point that we everyone should that's on the team.
It's gotta be fair.
I think we nailed this to death.
Yes.
I think, like I said, if this contract is not for sale, but I'd gladly give it to you if you decide to go into this business. Not only do we have these contracts, we have many contracts, each for a different asset class. So we have different contracts for single family. We have different contracts to take over debt. We have different contracts to buy corporations, which you can do when there's debt inside of them. There's you can put property into trusts. There's all sorts of different paperwork. I have thousands of agreements and pieces of paper that will actually protect you, make sure that you're in good hands, and that you're doing things the right way. And not only taking care of your future, but taking care of the assets that you have and buying it in the right way from the beginning to make more money, save money, and pay less in taxes as well. Because how things are structured also can save you money in taxes for depreciation schedules, which we're not going to get into right now. So anyway, great episode, I think.
Yeah.
Got into some contracts, which generally sounds pretty boring, but I think we try to make it as fun as possible.
Yep.
And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
If you like this episode of Big Fat Real Estate Checks, then show some love by leaving a comment and a good rating. Also, as a thank you for tuning in today, we've got a special free gift. The journey to passive cash flow for a life starts by finding deals, and it's easier than you think. Simply go to getdealsbytuesday.com, enter your email address, and we'll send you a free quick start course called Deals by Tuesday. Even if it's 11 p.m. Monday night, this course will show you how to find discounted real estate deals by Tuesday. It's that fast and simple. Go to getdealsbytuesday.com and start your journey toward life-changing cash flow today. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.